Welcome back to the Milwaukee Real Estate Market Update. We're covering real estate news and data and breaking it down to help you understand how it impacts your real estate decisions. Teaser. A Midwest city has been named most resilient housing market. Which one?
What to take away? We'll take a quick look at the market from our eyes. Rates just fell half percentage point. Did you see that in the headlines? What's the best time to list your home for sale for the most money with the least amount of work? I'm going to tell all.
Right now. We're here to give you the info you need to make the right decisions regarding your real estate. Should I buy a home now? Should I be selling? Is the housing market about to crash? Are these headlines I'm reading, content I'm seeing on social media true or even relevant to me? If you're new to the show, return because you found value in our previous episodes, please take a second to subscribe now. This helps us reach more people who need this information. Also, follow us and reach out on Instagram, Horizon Homes MKE, or our website, homewithhorizon.com. I'm Ty.
I'm Mike.
With Compass, your local real estate experts. And also, as always, episode brought to you by Venture Title. All right, well, we got a new person here in the old studio, also known as the supply closet. We've got Mike Ledzian here filling in for our friend Nick Harrington. How's it going, Mike?
Super good. I'm glad to be here. Super excited.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm ready to go in. Obviously, you bring a wealth of knowledge here to our team, specifically on like the seller listing side as well. So I know we'll probably dive into that at some point here, but otherwise we've got some national news, some things I think some home buyers out there might be excited about, as well as some local news going on too. But I guess let's just kick it off.
For sure.
How's the market?
I think the market's doing great. We're definitely seeing that consistent activity, especially on the selling end. Definitely noticed the uptick in activity recently, and that is pretty telltale for what happens this time of year. The school is back in season, and you see...
Yeah, did you get your life back a little bit now the kids
are
back in school?
I don't know. I feel like I lost a little bit of it too. So
yeah,
excited to kind of free up some of that time. But yeah, real estate's definitely taken over in that realm.
Yeah, because we're here September 9th. We just got, we're one weekend out more or less from a Labor Day weekend. I know for me, there wasn't a whole lot of people. It's kind of like crickets in the email for Friday through Monday, and then everyone
you have to make sure the email's still logged in, right?
Yeah.
No,
so
absolutely.
then it all kind of starts coming in. But I definitely feel like, I know for me personally, I definitely have people out there looking to buy a home, but they're starting to get a little bit less motivated at this point in the year, just because I know some of my clients, a lot of first-time home buyers I help, they've got leases that they have to kind of like fight with. And honestly, for one of my duplexes, I have it currently rented. It was like absolute crickets last month in terms of like showing activity on my rental. But then as soon as we got past Labor Day weekend, I had like 5 showings, 2 applications come in, and I did no change to price on it. And I think what that shows is there's probably a whole lot of people that have lease end dates of probably September 30th. And I think that will directly impact where buyer activity is coming from too.
100%.
And I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but you could probably agree that for a lot of sellers, they probably intuitively know the colder it gets, the colder that the opportunities might look like on their listing too, right?
100%. I think you're right on cue. With that buyer activity, probably trying to do something before the end of the year, and everybody's trying to beat the snow. So that's always the challenge.
Yeah. And I think it's always one of our best reminders. If you are operating with a lease, it's probably best start having those conversations with your landlord. If you're still thinking moving this year, maybe negotiate a flexible month-to-month kind of option. It may mean that you pay a little bit more extra monthly, but then also can you maybe even start working on your next year situation, because the market really kicks off in February. And can you get flexibility from your landlord either in a month-to-month, or can you buy out your lease with a 1-month rent payment? Start discussing those if you're okay, I think this might happen next year. But I know generally for a lot of my clients, it's once they get to the holidays, that's when their parents start saying, when are you gonna grow up and fulfill the American dream, buy the house.
Time to buy a house. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but
all those things.
I think just again, that being prepared and knowing what your possibilities are, having that flexibility and knowing what that is, it's worth every expense not to have to move twice if you don't have to.
Absolutely. And I think this is probably one of the crazier things moving to what's going on nationally right now is rates fell about 0.5% over the course of the last week. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think that I've really seen anything in news articles, and for some reason all my friends and family members aren't clapping and super excited. I feel like this is like rates going up and down. I feel like a lot of times when they go down, nobody talks about it. When they go up,
should be headline news. Yeah,
should be.
This is big for us. So obviously we would love to see that in a good spot. But nice movement to see it.
Yeah. So as of today, September 9th, we're looking at 6.3% for an average for a 30-year fixed. And honestly, like for a lot of the loan brokers or like the credit unions that we work with, a lot of times they're about like a 25.25% better. So you probably have a good opportunity of locking in somewhere close to like a 5.99. I feel like a good rule of thumb of if you know that your rate is somewhere around like a 7 when you bought, it's at least worth doing like a text or a call to your lender and be like, can we just run the math real quick? Just like a lot of other stuff we talk about, like education around it of sometimes these rate drops only happen for like a few days and then they go right back up. I think that the inflation report is due at the end of this week. Like these literally could go right back up to 7% by the end of this week. And if you haven't already started that conversation and know what to do to jump on these like small windows of opportunity, that's probably something just to have that conversation with your lender. I would say over the last year, there's probably half of my clients that probably owe a text message to the lender to say, hey, does this make sense for me to have a conversation with you right now?
Yeah, know what that break even is. There's a certain sweet spot where you're going to save some money on your monthly payment. Know what that is and be ready for it. Like you mentioned, that window of opportunity isn't very long. So I think just to be ready for that is huge.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one thing I'd love to just do here live on the call. I'm going to see how fast I can click around a computer. Let's say for like, we're right around like a $350,000 median purchase price these days. And I would say for a lot of my clients, they probably do closer to like 5% down. And rates were most of this year, I'd say on average, probably closer to like 7%. So I would say for like the typical first-time home buyer, you're looking at just principal and interest, not including the taxes and insurance, like $2,212 per month. That's what the calculator kicked out here for your principal and interest payment. Literally going from a 7 to a 6 brings you down to $1,993, which, that's just a hair over $200 a month, $2,400 a year. The break-even math, I guess, walk us through like what break-even math actually kind of means in terms of like closing costs for a refi.
Yeah, I think that's a good conversation to have with your lender. Know what those, refinancing may include, an appraisal and some of those closing cost fees. Know what that all entails and know what your plan is for the house too. You might only be there for a short term. If you're planning long term, obviously these refinance situations are huge because it's going to save you money and keep that fixed cost as low as possible.
Let's even do a fictional scenario. What's a appraisal run these days? Like $700?
Yeah,
probably. All right, and what do we think? Like 1% for the cost of the refi? Maybe it's less, but conservatively.
Yeah, I think conservatively, and there might be some opportunities to buy down points to give even lower. So I think worth that conversation to your lender to see what that.
Let's make it up. You'd have to go to a lender. We can't actually quote interest rates and we can't quote closing costs. Let's just say that your lender and their company was making 1% off of doing your new loan. I think a lot of people actually don't realize how their lender gets paid. But then add on an appraisal, some other costs. Let's say it's like $4,200 maybe for the typical refinance buyer out there. Run me through. So we kind of just calculated like $220 or so per month in savings. The break-even rate, essentially, if we take $4,200 and divide it by, let's call it $220 months savings, break-even comes in at 19 months.
19 months.
So when we say break-even months, 19 months, what does that actually mean for somebody living in their home? What does break-even actually mean?
That means by that time, that expense of doing that refinance or getting that lower mortgage rate have been worth it. You're going to end up saving that money by that.
If you expect to stay in your home for about 2 years, you're going to at least be break even. Yeah, and honestly, I would say for most people, that's probably the case. If you don't foresee yourself like, imminently outgrowing it or potentially considering a downsize, like, that's definitely going to be something to consider. I would say for me, like, I kind of like thinking less about like the break even numbers, just like $220 these days goes like that's probably like half a month's worth of groceries for most people. So it's like some people that don't have kids yet, but it's all about to change. But I was just that can go pretty far. So I almost feel like, man, if there's just like a tangible number, you just know like $300-$400 a month. That was pretty close for what it was for when I refinanced my home a couple years ago. I think it was like $375 a month. and I knew that I'd be moving out of it because it was a duplex house hack. And I'm like, man, this is, you just got to jump on it. And I think that refi window was like 4 days long. So just kind of like some best practices there for people to kind of consider. One, how to run a principal and interest kind of, mortgage calculator, but your lender can certainly walk you through that as well as the break-even math.
Absolutely.
But also out there in local news, this one's pretty big. This Midwestern city was just named the most resilient housing market in the U.S. I wonder who it could be.
Who could it be?
Of course, the only reason we added this to the show, with this being the Milwaukee Real Estate Market update, is obviously it's Milwaukee that they're talking about. So kind of just going through this, the very first thing I mentioned, home prices here in Milwaukee are obviously below the national median. But the real estate company Redfin just released a report of the best performing housing markets, and most are in the Midwest and the Northeast. They call it the Rust Belt, everything else. And here's a couple stats they pulled out of here. So Redfin found that home sales in Milwaukee increased 12% over last year, while home prices rose 8.2%. I know that seems pretty much in line. I feel like a lot of the data we've seen on previous episodes are, the actual number of homes that closed is only slightly up year over year, and we're seeing a little bit inventory build, but just even seeing 8% price growth when, historical long-term averages are closer to 3, and I think the nation right now is at 1. That's pretty cool to see overall. But what we always like to do on the show, and I'd love your take on, Mike, is obviously here's some stats, right? It's the most robust, resilient market we have. We've got sales increasing. We've got the price increasing. Dissect the actual numbers for what does that even mean to maybe your buyer client or your seller client?
Well, it means the market's still probably in an inventory shortage, and that we still have competition, and that competition is sort of keeping those prices up, and it doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon.
Well, what if I just want to wait for prices to come down? It's going to be soon, right?
Well, there's a lot of people trying to wait that out. Unfortunately, the data just doesn't show that. I think we're definitely trending the other direction, and there's always opportunities, for timing of, hey, guess what? There's a lull at certain times of the year, or when interest rates maybe do tick up a little bit. But I think over the long haul, we seem to be one of those marketplaces that definitely is not slowing down.
I feel like here in Milwaukee, like other markets that are more balanced across the country, if they're just consistent in the game, you're probably going to be able to find a situation where you can negotiate a little bit more as the buyer against the seller. I feel like in our market, opportunities come up when sellers make mistakes.
Sure.
And I had this situation that Nick and I talked about in a previous episode of all they had to do was stretch out the carpet in their living room and tidy up a couple other things. But I think they were just oh yeah, you list it at $399 and it goes for $20K more than that every time. And that time it didn't. We negotiated on the price. We had better terms than my clients had lost out on 4 other homes, and they came into this one with no competition. So I feel like we have a market where there are opportunities, but it's only when you and your agent can recognize it. When it's there and it comes through those clients had written 4 offers. So they were very experienced home buyers relative to somebody that was just window shopping or going through open houses.
100%. It's a being ready, the preparation, and even from the seller's perspective, they probably dropped the ball a little bit, and the reality, the buyers are going to fight over the good ones, and I think that's the marketplace we're seeing. That's what's still going on, and you have a better chance of selling higher, quicker, obviously, in those situations as a seller.
Definitely. I think the other piece that we've got that we wanted to dive into here is a couple items that I pulled up for you. Again, you've been in the business here for 17, 18 years.
Coming up in 18.
18 years, coming up soon. So with that, obviously, I want to, get to the wealth of knowledge out here into the universe. I know that there's a lot of common questions that first-time home sellers have. So let's call it 3 or 4 years ago, they bought their first home. Sure. They've completely forgot everything unless they've been listening to the Milwaukee Real Estate Market update. And now they're probably going to have some very common questions being a home seller. I know even for myself as an agent, and I sold my first home 2 years ago, I didn't realize how much my wife, she had a ton of questions, and it was every hour, everything else. But what we're trying to pull out, and some of this is from questions got from my wife, but also probably from ChatGPT that we pulled together. 3 most common first-time home seller questions I've got for you, and maybe you can kind of unpack the process of getting those answered for a client. Most importantly, the very first one, what's my home worth?
That's the ultimate question, right? I think, There's so many places to start, and obviously sometimes that's online. But the reality is each house is a little bit different. Each house is maintained differently. Each house, different updates. So the best way to really determine that is to talk to a good agent who can really, again, tour the property, give their analysis, give their thoughts, and be able to again account for any of those recent updates you did and come up with that market value based on not only recent sales but some of your active competition. In marketplaces where maybe there is inventory sitting on the market, you need to know what that is and what that potentially might affect you if you're again going to be competing.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that we run into is sometimes this almost feels like not like a battle, but it's like the homeowner usually has like an idea. It's like, okay, I've seen my neighbors sell. Of course, my house is better than my neighbors, but like, I feel like it's better to have it be more of like a dialogue of like, here's the numbers, and like instead of like taking like, oh, let's do these averages and these dollar per square foot and all these numbers and cram it in. I like finding like one example in the neighborhood, and it's like, hey, let's try to like mimic their scenario of how are we going to prepare and execute, because the next question usually comes up is, which we'll get to, is what do I need to do to actually get that value? Because maybe I'm discouraged as a first-time home seller, thinking I could have sold it for way more, but maybe there's a path to get there too. But so that comes in the form of like a comparable market analysis. Is there anything else that you're coming prepared with to kind of help them through that what's your home worth situation?
Well, I think again, just looking at the house, the condition, and I'll stop here.
No, good.
Let me pause for a second. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what you said. So
I can't even remember what I said. That's part of this.
In regards to picking that one home, that's what I was kind of focused on.
You said picking that one home?
You mentioned like picking another home that's on the market like it.
Oh, okay.
And then sort of like mimicking what they did. So that's what I was going to try to piggyback on. I just can't remember what I was going to say. Now I lost it. Where were we at?
No, that's all good. But I always feel like that's a good exercise to be collaborative and pick a home that we want to replicate, because honestly, a lot of times I feel like it's hard to say what it's going to sell at, because I would say I'm wrong more than I am right in helping somebody determine what their home's worth, because we say this a lot on the show. There's only like 2 lines in the 30 pages of paperwork that talk about price, and then everything else is like terms and conditions of the offers. Like sometimes like you may actually have a priority of convenience or the certainty you get to the finish line. It's not always about price, but if it is, that's a part of that collaboration, working together with your agent of what is our home worth, as opposed to, I think a lot of people try to come and be like, well, who's the agent that's going to come in and tell me the highest number, and let's just go pick them, because that may not be strategically the best move depending on your actual goals.
Right, and it all comes down to your goals, right? And back to your point regarding finding a similar house maybe that went through the same sales path. I think the reality, a lot of those buyers are going to be the ones coming to this property as well if it is similar. So I think it's a good way to sort of again attract the same type of buyer and activity.
Yeah, and even doing some research to some of those listing agents that posted those homes, like how many people are left over, because that's going to be just one more step in the process of, if there was 5 people that wrote an offer, only one person gets the home. So recreating that scenario, and I think that's probably the biggest leap of faith a lot of homeowners need to go through when they list their home, is we may not be listing your home at exactly where we think it's going to close, and sometimes you can be totally surprised. I know that's happened to me multiple times this year, but that's okay. I'm happy to be proved wrong when it means that you're making more money.
100%. I always call it the marketing price, because guess what? That's why we have to strategically be there in order to get the activity that we're really looking for. And I think that's important.
For sure. So I'm actually going to, this one I think is important, I kind of alluded to, is do I need to make any repairs or updates to my home? Because I want to do nothing, right? Like,
don't we all?
Like, can you just grab photos right now with your iPhone and just list it, right?
I mean, you could. I don't know if that's the right strategy, right? And I think every person, every seller's in a little bit different position in regards to their home and what they're able to do, either financially or even with time. But that's something I like to, each situation's a little bit different, and sort of give them those options. Here's sort of the maybe as is price if we were to just again take those quick photos and put a sign in the yard. But there's a certain strategy. Guess what? We only get one opportunity to come on the market, that one first impression, and it is super important. People are going to judge you based on that. We want to have the pictures perfect, we want to have it that everything ready to go once we go out to the market. So some of those small little changes can go a very long way. Oftentimes they're small cosmetic things, but sometimes bigger projects, and that's always something we want to break down and look at those potential options of, is there a spot where you can maybe spend a little bit of time and money and make a lot more, and that's important.
And I feel like the layout that I usually just go through my brain is very process oriented. It's like, how much time do we have to work with? Because if it's September 9th and you're going to tell me I want to be moved out first week of October, hey, we do not have unlimited options for the work that we can do to maximize this value. So like, first question is, do we have the time? The second one is, I like to like describe perfect in that walkthrough of, here's all the things you could do. I'm not saying like a lot of them are optional, but certainly I almost always put all the focus behind like the first impression room, or you walk up, the path up to the front door, making sure it's fresh,
Absolutely.
it smells good. Like, you don't have the crusty light switch and outlets that are just right there in vision. Maybe make sure you're open. You're like, we'll test some windows as when we're doing our visual inspection on the buyer side. So make sure like the very first set of rooms is like good, well put together, and it tells the story, because some of these tours and appointments with buyers, they only last 15-20 minutes. You have a very small amount of time to actually
Short window to really absolutely show the
impress
best.
them.
Yeah, best part
Awesome.
about that home.
And then of course, what's the best time to sell?
Ooh, right now.
Yeah.
Always. No, there's always a good reason to obviously sell, but I think talking with your agent, knowing the certain timing aspects. We just talked about coming off of summer and going through Labor Day weekend and almost having a different market on the other side of that. I think that's something definitely take in consideration. Weather here in Milwaukee area definitely affects us a lot. So I know as we get into the winter months, a heavy snow weekend could definitely affect activity. So that's something we always look out for. Not that you can really predict it ahead of time too far, but just to be ready in case we need to pivot a little bit, because we, ultimately we need to get people through the door.
Yeah. Here would be the next question. Obviously, you've got more experience than me. Have you ever listed a home over a holiday, like a Thanksgiving or Christmas, and what were the results?
Not as good.
Not as good.
No, I mean,
because you almost want to be like, when other people zig, you want to zag. Nobody else is listed. You're the only.
You're the only one. Yeah.
You're the only one.
Unfortunately, sometimes you deal with people maybe not even being present. A lot of people are going to be traveling or out of town, so that's always the challenge with holidays. But they're tied up with time. I would say, their attention is definitely in different places at that point in time as well. I would say, oftentimes, I feel like after the holidays, I get a lot of contacts from people. On Christmas, I get people who reach out to me and say, we're jumping in the market, probably having those conversations at the holidays. But for the actual activity, I like to probably work around that a little bit in order to maybe get the most attention we can.
Yeah, you finally get a little bit of like space. You can sit around, relax. The kids are distracted with their toys. Like you can actually do a little bit of game planning. So naturally, a lot of those conversations come together. But any other tips, if you were to say like one other thing that sellers could do, if you just waved a magic wand and every single seller took your advice, what's the number one thing that they could do if they're getting prepared in the next 6 months or so?
I would say just, again, 6 months, it seems like a lot of time. It's really not, depending on the condition of your home. I would say, again, sort of preparing as far in advance as you can. So to have that sort of plan, and even if there's nothing really to do, at least to be in contact with your agent and know, hey, this is our sort of target date, but let us know if something's sort of changing in the marketplace. We see that all the time where, again, a certain trend or interest rates, I mean, there's things that can definitely affect our marketplace and either slow it down or speed it up. We want to be aware of that and be ready for it when the time comes.
Definitely. And honestly, one of my favorite things, because I like taking that analytical approach, it's what are other homes in your neighborhood looking like? Like, what's the amount of inventory? Are the inventory trends going higher? Maybe some of them are going to expire over the holiday time frame.
Right.
I think the stat we found earlier this year is half of all expired listings come back to the market. So you might not be the only person thinking about listing in February, and there might be a compounding amount. So there's a lot of inputs to kind of go in and like get the information, because there's just some information you just don't have as just like the consumer that your agent can provide to you.
And it's so different market to market, city to city, almost neighborhood to neighborhood. I mean, it really is, it's different everywhere you go. So I think it's just to be important and pay attention to that. And like you said, knowing what, those expireds, if they are coming back on, and being able to be, ready to be the best one, at least on the market at that point in time.
Definitely. Yeah, you can't, your home is not listed in isolation. It's listed in a sea of other homes. I think we've got well over 3,000 homes listed in the Milwaukee greater area. Like, you're not the only one. So the variables that we're controlling aren't just the ones that you can
No.
control, but we have to be aware of them so we can make sure you're well positioned in the market. But
Totally.
hey man, thanks for hopping on today.
This is
and
great.
Obviously, everybody else, thanks for listening in. Make sure you give us a follow, subscribe, share this episode with somebody who needs it, and we'll be back again soon with your Milwaukee real estate market update.
Thanks, everyone.